The Walt Disney Animation Studio as of November 2022 has theatrically released 61 animated films, excluding Pixar, with the first being Snow White in 1937. Of those 61, only 3 have black main characters, Princess and the Frog, Atlantis, and Strange World, with Princess and the Frog being the only one that has a character added to the pantheon of recognized Disney princesses and princes. This is Blerd Theory, and I wanted to do a deep dive into why I think Disney is adverse to specifically black characters when it comes to those that they choose to highlight. And I wanted to focus on black love interests in this one. For context, we have to understand the time period during Disney's first foray into theatrically released animated films. Snow White was released in 1937 when racism, discrimination, and stereotypes were very much running rampant throughout the US. Not much changed. In the Walt Disney biography, Walt Disney, The Triumph of the American Imagination, the author Neil Gabler cites a meeting in which Walt himself calls Snow White's dwarves a pile and uses the term pickaninny. So there's that. We largely recognize the years between 1965 and 68 as the end of the Jim Crow era, and interracial marriage was finally legalized in all 50 states since 1967. So in all their human animated films, there was no way they could have a black man or woman be the love interest of a white counterpart, as their fairy tales were all European, and they for sure weren't making the main character black. This throws out Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty as being black or having black love interest. During this time period, black femininity was also viewed as undesirable or strictly motherly, as seen in the mammies portrayed on the screen as opposed to someone that you would want romantically. Disney's team was ill-equipped to tell these stories at the time. Assuming Disney wasn't itching to include black characters in their love stories as to not be too controversial at the time, the first dark-skinned love interest didn't show up until Esmeralda in 1997's Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yet she's not even a black woman as she is French Romani. We would have to wait until 2001's Atlantis the Lost Empire for the first animated black love interest and lead, and Atlantis' Princess Kida, with Brandy's live-action TV Cinderella debuting in 97. Still crazy because to this day, Kida isn't officially recognized as a Disney princess, while literally being one by birth. We did get our first recognized princess in 2009 with the debut of Princess Tiana and Princess and the Frog, which is amazing. Yet we're still waiting on a Disney prince, as Naveen is from the fictional land of Maldonia, which is inspired by the Maldives, making Naveen most likely Southeast Asian. Why such a long wait for a black Disney prince? Now this I attribute to America's view of black masculinity. Again, Snow White was released in 1937 and Birth of a Nation had just taken the world by storm in 1915, where black men were portrayed by white actors in blackface that showed them as unfeeling, unserious, unintelligent, and hypersexualized brutes that were only after white women, that were all about tearing down America if left unchecked by their white counterparts. In this era of Disney, they're all about staying away from controversy to protect their dollar, and I don't think they have any idea how to portray black men in a non-stereotypical light. This is why the crew behind the camera is as important as the representation on that screen. We need black women, men, cisgender, and transgender people for this story to be told right. Only time will tell if it'll happen. We spoke about black characters as love interests in the last video, and now we'll focus on black people as heroines and heroes in this one. As mentioned in the previous video, as of November 2022, the Walt Disney Animation Studio has released 61 movies since 1937 Snow White, with only 3 having black main characters. In those early days, America was enraptured in the damsel in distress princess that is saved by her knight in shining armor. And due to the time period, and the fairy tales being mostly European, the main characters and love interests in these movies were never going to be black. Now, it's one thing to be a love interest, and it's another to be a heroine or a hero in your own story. As Disney slowly pivoted away from strictly romances, they needed to find their heroes and heroines in these adventure movies. The first hero that wasn't white was Mowgli in 1967's The Jungle Book, and the first female hero can be seen as Pocahontas, but the story they chose to tell is just wild, so Mulan is right there. We wouldn't see the first hero of our own until, again, 2009's Princess and the Frog, as 2001's Kida still had to be saved by Milo in order to save Atlantis, and I feel like there are a couple of reasons for this. Why the wait? I believe the first reason for this wait is the evolution of America's view of black femininity. Once only seen as undesirable and motherly as seen by the mammies on the screen, as time moved on, black women became hypersexualized in their entertainment world, and tropes were quickly thrown at them from every direction. Of course, the white savior trope that Kida fell victim to, the angry, aggressive black woman trope, and also the strong black woman trope that honestly Tiana almost fell victim to, in which black women are put through the most traumatic experiences, usually racial, known to man in entertainment, but keep everything together and persevere because that's just what black women do. Now on the surface, this trope isn't harmful, and some aspects aren't, but digging a bit deeper, we can see that this trope can also be a liability. According to Amani M. Allen, Associate Professor of Community Health Sciences and Epidemiology at the University of California, Berkeley, and lead author of a study published in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences, some aspects of the superwoman persona, including feeling an obligation to present an image of strength and to suppress one's emotions, seem to be protective of health, diminishing the negative health effects of chronic racial discrimination. But other aspects, such as the intense drive to succeed and obligation to help others, were detrimental to health. Sound familiar? The second reason is America's view of black wealth. 9 times out of 10, the heroines or heroes in these stories can be princesses or princes, or at least living a comfortable life. America's view of black wealth has been skewed in media, as you would think affluent black families aren't prevalent unless they're entertainers, and you think we were never wealthy in our history. See Black Wall Street. This directly affected our portrayals as royals or people with resources in these movies. The third reason is that black people have historically been viewed as undeserving of a happy ending without a caveat, and are unwelcome in these fantasy spaces. Why do you think they've been so mad when we show up in their made up lands? Disney has to be willing to do the work and have us in the rooms where it happens to make sure the content is right. As mentioned in the previous videos, as of November 2022, the Walt Disney Animation Studio has released 61 movies starting with 1937 Snow White, with only 3 having black main characters, being generous with Atlantis and excluding Pixar's Soul. If we include Pixar's Soul and Spies in Disguise that Disney now owns, 3 out of the 5 movies' black characters were turned into animals and remain that way for the majority of their films. Why is that a running theme for us? We spoke about black characters as the heroine or the hero in the last video, and now we'll be focusing on black people being turned into animals in this one. The first reason, of course, is slavery, with the dehumanizing of our people, as we weren't even considered a full person and likened to cattle. A whole video can be made on that reason alone, but the second reason is also time period again. Disney's first movie was in 1937 during the 20th century, where newspaper articles were still referring to black men as being gorilla-like, wild beasts, and brutes. You may say, well, that was such a long time ago, surely it isn't as blatant now. Please refer to this article where black men were referred to as predators of the African plain from 2001, the same year Keita was introduced. Gregory S. Parks, professor of law at Wake Forest, published an essay in 2021 titled "When They See Us, The Great White Awakening to Black Humanity," where he cited a 2008 study titled "Not Yet Human: Implicit Knowledge, Historical Dehumanization, and Contemporary Consequences" from noted psychologist Philippa T. Goff, stating, "Whites dehumanize blacks by automatically associating them with apes." In another of his studies, Goff and his colleagues found that people more easily associated ape images with black male faces than with white male faces. Moreover, they found that whites more easily associated blacks with apes than any other type of animal. Even while there is a lengthy and robust history of whites associating blacks with non-human primates, the black primate association seems to largely operate outside of explicit cultural knowledge. Now again, that was in 2008, 1 year before Tiana, our first black princess, was introduced. By no means am I saying these animators think of us this way now, but I am using this as context for how black people have been dehumanized in America from the very beginning, and how this terrible history could have affected media, specifically Disney's, from 1937 until now. The third reason is that I think it's a bit easier to code animal characters than it is to present living black human characters for a full feature-length film. Disney and other animation studios have been coding their non-human characters for years, hence why we claim the Goofy movie as a black film and characters like Goliath, Knuckles, and Piccolo as black characters. There was never a plethora of black animated characters for us, so in addition to the few we had to find ways to relate to media that wasn't made to be mass consumed by us. I feel animators have taken advantage of this, as they can turn our black human characters into animals and fall back on coding, our culture used as a backdrop, and the voice actors without having to animate the nuances, stature, and behavior of their human counterparts for the whole film. Again, Disney just has to be willing to do the work and have us in those decision-making rooms to make sure this is done right next time.